the 299th orbit. I was supposed to be alone for 300 days. That part at least was true. Everything else was negotiable. Reality, for example, whether the blue and white sphere beneath me was the same Earth I had left, whether the voice in my headset belonged to a living man or a recording or a ghost, whether I had actually survived the launch that hurled me up here. But on day one, those were still just words in a risk briefing, made of paper and statistics, and the slow, calm voices of doctors who had never left the ground. On day one, the world was still simple. My name is Alexei Voronov, mission specialist of the Vityaz orbital platform. One man, one station, 300 days to prove that a human mind could endure isolation better than any algorithm predicted. A long-duration psychological and biomedical experiment wrapped around a physics mission no one outside the agencies knew the full details of. Primary objective, they called it. Continuous monitoring of low-frequency gravitational anomalies from Earth's orbit, using an experimental ring of superconducting sensors that circled the station like a halo. Unofficially, the joke in the cosmonaut corps was that they were sending me up here to listen for the universe breathing. On day one, the universe exhaled with a roar of engines, and I left the ground. We were 4 on ascent. I remember that clearly. The smell of metal and plastic in the capsule, the cramped shoulder of Sergei pressed against mine, the way his eyes met mine as the countdown reached 5, 4, 3. He winked. "If we die," he said over the intercom, "I call dibs on haunting Baikonur." "Too late," I told him. "I already have an apartment there picked out." Our commander, Oleg, snorted, "Focus, children." The 4th seat was occupied by a mannequin packed with sensors, a silent 5th crew member. They called it KIRA, Kinematic Inertial Recording Anthropomorph. Hysterical laughter in the design bureau, I imagined, when they'd approved that acronym. KIRA's featureless face stared up at the hatch, indifferent. Ground control's voice counted down the last seconds. The world shuddered. Gravity punched us into our seats. Flames and acceleration and the familiar, crushing weight on my chest. I watched Sergei's cheeks pull back just a little as the globe built. "Third stage separation nominal," someone said in my ear. "Trajectory within parameters." The vibration smoothed. The pressure eased. My stomach did that brief, sickening flip that always came when the rocket stopped fighting the sky and surrendered us to orbit. "Welcome to space," Oleg said, a smile tugging at his mouth. We spent a day in transfer orbit, then docked to Vityaz with only minor swearing. Oleg and Sergei helped me power the station to full load, complete the checklists, and then, 24 hours later, they slid back into the capsule, sealed the hatch, and left. I watched their ship separate from the station window, a small, white insect drifting away along its assigned trajectory, heading home. "See you in 300 days, Sergei's last words crackled over the air, a half-second delayed by the relay. "Don't start talking to the furniture too early." Then they were gone. And I was alone. Days have a strange texture up here. There is no sunrise and sunset, not like on the ground. There are 16 cycles of day and night each time you circle the Earth, every 90 minutes. Horizon glows, limb brightens, the planet rolls from black into blue, then out again into stark darkness. To keep my circadian rhythm steady, they pinned me to Greenwich time and built a day for me out of routines. 0600 wake check systems quick log. 0700 exercise, treadmill on bungees, bike resistant straps. 0830 breakfast, calm window with ground, jokes traded with flight surgeon. 090013 00 experiments, maintenance, observational tasks. 1300 lunch. 1400 00 physics payload operations, anything that broke, more logs. 1830 dinner. 1900 free time. Reading, movies, staring at Earth until my eyes hurt. 2200 sleep. Sometimes the schedule bent for orbital night passes over specific ground stations or for solar storms, but mostly it held. The first month passed like that. I learned the way shadows crawled across the control panels during each 90-minute loop, the way the station creaked when it moved from sunlight into Earth's shadow and the metal temperature changed. I learned which fans had a slightly off-kilter bearing, which ones would go first if something decided to fail. I spoke to the psychologists over a link that always introduced just enough delay to make interruptions awkward. How are you feeling, Alexei? Fine. Any unusual thoughts? I'm in a box falling endlessly around a ball, with vacuum on all sides and no one else to talk to. Nothing unusual at all. They studied my micro-expressions on their screens, saw how fast my eyes moved, how often I blinked. They administered their tests. I passed them all. They didn't know about the other voice. It began as a whisper in the noise. The superconducting ring that circled Vityaz was always humming at the edge of perception, a subsonic vibration that came from the machinery, not the sensors themselves. They were chilled to near absolute zero, floating in magnetic traps. Electronic whispers traced the slightest distortions in spacetime that washed through our orbit, the long gravitational swell of tides from Earth and Moon, the distant sigh of more massive objects far outside our system. My job was to monitor the data, flag anomalies, and occasionally recalibrate the system when the ground computers asked. On day 47, during one of those calibrations, I heard something. It wasn't sound. Not really. It was a pattern in the readouts, a twitch in the graphs that traced amplitude over time. For a moment, the line did something it wasn't supposed to do. It rose, fell, rose again in a stuttering rhythm that triggered a primitive part of my brain that zeroed in on pattern. 3 short pulses, a pause, 3 long, 3 short. I frowned at the screen, suddenly cold. I watched the numbers scroll. The ring settled back to its baseline hum. The anomaly was gone. Control, this is Vityaz, I said, keying the mic. I'm observing a transient in the gravimetric sensors, sending you the last 60 seconds of data. Timestamp 47 days 13:02 station time. A crackle then. Affirmative, Vityaz, we copy. Stand by for analysis. It took them 9 minutes to answer. Vityaz, this is Control. We see the transient. It's within expected noise for the system. No action needed. Continue nominal operations. The flight dynamics officer added, nice catch though. I floated there, tethered by my toes to the console rail, staring at the line that had already smoothed at the no-normal curve. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Just noise, I muttered, sure. I tried to forget about it. The next one came on day 63. Patterns are hungry things. Once your mind has tasted them, it goes looking for more. I started seeing familiar sequences in the data more often. Little stutters in the background noise, bursts of amplitude that looked like Morse code or heartbeat or breathing. Control always had a reason. Solar activity interfering with the field coils. A micrometeoroid impact we didn't catch on the hull sensors. Thermal drift of the cryocoolers during the eclipse. Always a reason. Always a way to fold the anomaly back into the world we already understood. But I was up here, living with the hum. On day 83, I woke with an iron bar through my chest. I couldn't breathe. For a second I thought the station had lost pressure, that some unseen leak had finally let the void in. Then I realized I was having a panic attack, body drenched in sweat, heart racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. I forced myself to count breaths, fingers dug into the foam of my sleep bag. In, out, in, out. The world shrank to airflow and pulse. Eventually, the iron bar dissolved. I unzipped the sleeping bag, pushed away from the wall, and swam to the main window. Earth rolled slowly below, a broad swath of black ocean and scattered white cloud. The limb glowed blue. The thin atmosphere caught sunlight and flared, a halo around the planet. It calmed me, like it always did. The world looked so fragile from here, like something you could break by looking too hard. This is why you're here, I told myself, to carry the weight so others don't have to. The gravimetric ring hummed behind me, a low, almost soothing vibration. The anomaly came 5 minutes later. The graphs on the panel blossomed into chaos. Numbers jittered, spiked, dipped. The baseline curve shredded and reformed. For 20 seconds the universe had a seizure. And then it was over. "Control, this is Vityaz," I said. "We've had a major disturbance in the gravimetric sensors, sending full data dump now." No answer. I frowned, checked the comm panels. Signal strength nominal, antenna alignment good. My last incoming packet had arrived 90 seconds earlier, a routine telemetry request. The next should have come 20 seconds ago. "Control, this is Vityaz. Do you copy?" Static. An irrational, childish fear tightened my throat. I forced myself to go through the standard troubleshooting steps. Check the uplink, power cycle the transceiver, confirm orientation. No obvious fault. On the third call, the link clicked open. "Vityaz, this is Control," a voice said, distant and faint, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "We read you. We lost your signal for a moment. Repeat your last transmission." I exhaled, only then realizing I'd been holding my breath. "Control, confirming we observed a major transient in the gravimetric sensors. Timestamp day 83-06-14. Forwarding data." "Copy that, Vityaz," the voice answered. There was something odd about the cadence, but I couldn't pin it down. "We'll analyze and advise." The hum of the ring settled slowly back to baseline. I watched the Earth, thin clouds over blue sea, a ribbon of coastline I couldn't quite identify. For a heartbeat, I thought the planet's shadow looked wrong, like the curve of night didn't match the curve I expected, as if someone had taken the sphere and very gently squeezed. Then I blinked and it was gone. Just stress, I told myself. I didn't sleep well after that. The dreams began on day 100. In the first one, I stood on the launch pad at Baikonur, suit unsealed. There was frost on the metal. The rocket towered above me, black against a violet sky, its skin covered in a lacework of symbols that crawled and shifted when I tried to focus on them. The air smelled scorched, like something had already burned. "Alex," a voice behind me. I turned, but there was no one there. Only the scaffolding, the umbilicals connecting the rocket to the tower, the open hatch above. "Alexei." The voice came from everywhere. From the sky, from the concrete, from the bones in my chest. It sounded like my own voice played backward, syllables stretched and warped. "Do you know which time this is?" it asked. Before I could answer, the world folded in on itself like metal under pressure, the sky collapsing into a tunnel of light. I woke with a shout, fingers clawing for a handhold, weightless and drenched in sweat. I floated in darkness, only the green glow of the panel LEDs to orient me. My heart rate was 140. My throat tasted of copper. I checked the clock, 03:12 station time. The hum of the gravimetric ring sounded louder than usual, a deeper note under the mechanical fans. "Just a dream," I whispered, "just a dream." It didn't feel like it. I didn't tell the psychologists about the voice. At first it was pride. I had trained for this, for isolation and stress. Admitting that my own mind had begun to turn against me felt like failure. Later, when the dreams became whispers on the edge of waking, it was something else. A superstition. As if speaking about them would invite them fully into the world. But I told them about the panic attacks, the difficulty sleeping, the low-level anxiety. They adjusted my schedule. They added more check-ins. They recommended breathing exercises and mindfulness techniques, nothing out of protocol. "Your scores are still within acceptable range," one of them said. "Long-duration solitary missions tend to produce these symptoms. It doesn't mean you're breaking." I nodded, smiling for the camera. Below, Earth rolled on. I tracked familiar ground: the arc of the Mediterranean, the brown smear of the Sahara, the dark spine of the Urals. I timed my glances to maximize passes over home. On good days, with the right weather, I could make out the faint grid of Moscow's lights flickering through the atmospheric haze. I watched storms bloom and dissipate, continents slide into night. I didn't notice at first when the nights began to lengthen. Day 150. "Alexei, your melatonin synthesis markers are slightly off," the flight surgeon said, her face framed by static. "We're seeing circadian drift. Have you been sleeping at regular intervals?" "Yes." "Any trouble waking at the correct time?" "No more than usual." "Any subjective differences in the length of your sleep?" She asked it casually. I heard the weight in it. I thought about it. "Sometimes it feels like I've only been asleep for a minute," I admitted. "Sometimes it feels like I've been gone for days, but the clock is always what it should be when I wake up." There was a slight delay as she relayed my answer to someone off camera. I saw her eyes flick sideways, as if reading. "That's a normal perception in this environment," she said finally. "We'll adjust your light exposure cycles to help stabilize your rhythms." Copy Doc. After the link cut, I floated back to the window. We were over the Pacific, a vast, dark expanse with only the occasional smear of cloud to break the monotony. The limb of Earth curved gently away, stars sharp above the line where atmosphere ended. I'd spent half a year circling this view. It should have been familiar. But the stars looked wrong. Not dramatically. There was no extra sun hanging in the sky, no new constellation spelling out my name. But the pattern of them, the density, the color, something was off. A triangle of bright stars where there should have been a line. A faint smear of light where it didn't belong. I checked the station's orientation. Verified our position with onboard star trackers. Everything said we were where we should be, looking at the sky we had always known. "Maybe you're the one who's wrong," I told myself. The hum of the ring rose, then fell, like a creature taking a slow breath. On day 200, the universe blinked. I was halfway through my exercise block when every light in the station went out. The treadmill whined down, the fan spun to silence. The hum of the gravimetric ring cut off mid-breath. For a fraction of a second there was nothing. No sound, no movement, only the thin vibration of my muscles, the frantic pounding of my heart. Total darkness. Then, with a soft series of clicks, the emergency systems came online. Red strips lit along the edges of the walls, casting long, blood-colored shadows. The fans restarted at reduced speed, a thinner whisper in the air. "Control, this is Vityaz," I said, chest heaving. "We've had a full power outage, switching to emergency protocols. Do you copy?" Silence. I went through the emergency checklists, hands moving while my mind tried not to imagine what a total loss of power could mean for a station full of cryogenic equipment and delicate electronics. Battery levels, 96%. Good. The primary bus had tripped, but the backups had engaged as designed. I floated to the main console, flipped the breakers in sequence, watched the panels flicker. Slowly, systems came back. Lighting returned to white. The treadmill display rebooted. The cryocoolers spun up their whine. The ring came back last. Its hum crawled into the air like something waking from a bad dream. "Control, this is Vityaz. Do you copy?" The speaker hissed. This is Khan." The voice stuttered, cutting in and out like someone flicking a switch. "Repeat transmission, Vityaz." "Control, I'm reading intermittent comm. Confirm you have me. A long pause, then a voice clear and sharp. Alexei, is that you? I froze. It was Control, but not any controller I recognized. The accent was different, the intonation strange. Affirmative, Control, I said slowly. This is Vityaz. We've experienced a power anomaly. Systems are stable now. Please confirm. Another pause, a crackle. My God, the voice whispered, not entirely muted. We're actually getting him. When the voice returned to me, it was more composed. Vityaz, this is Mission Control Moscow, it said carefully. We read you, Alexei. We copy your report of a power anomaly. Stand by for guidance. The title was wrong. We didn't call it Mission Control Moscow. We called it TS Up. The acronym was sacred. I stared at the speaker, at the panel where my call sign glowed. Control, request identification of CAPCOM, I said. A beat, say again, Vityaz. Identify who's speaking, I repeated. Name and position. Another longer pause. This is Flight Director Elena Sokolova, the voice said. Alexei, we need to ask you a few questions as well. Flight Director, not CAPCOM. Go ahead, I said, throat dry. What is your mission designation, Alexei? Long-duration orbital mission Vityaz, single crew, primary payload. Gravimetric observatory, I recited automatically. Launch from Baikonur on, I gave the date. Silence. Control. Alexei, Sokolova said finally. Your mission, that launch, it failed. The words were absurd, like being told that water had decided not to be wet. Negative, Control, I said. I am currently aboard Vityaz in stable orbit. All systems nominal aside from the reported power anomaly. I watched the separation. I've been here for, I glanced at the chrono, 200 days. Alexei, she said again slowly, as if speaking to a frightened child, we have the footage. The booster failed during second stage burn. The vehicle broke up over the Kazakh steppe. There were no survivors. I waited for the punchline, for Sergei's laugh in the background, for someone to say, just kidding, we wanted to see if you were paying attention. Static filled the gap instead. Control, that's not funny, I said, my voice shook. Repeat last transmission. The launch failed, she said. Your capsule never reached orbit. I looked at my hands. I flexed my fingers. I felt the air moving over my skin, the resistive tug of the bungees on my shoulders, the slow, steady spin of the world through the window. Behind me the ring hummed, deep and low. Then where am I? I asked. They couldn't answer, not at first. Telemetry from Vityaz ceased 5 seconds after second stage failure, Sokolova said. Her voice steadied as she fell back into report mode, clinging to procedure. We declared loss of vehicle. The Board of Inquiry, she hesitated, determined structural failure due to manufacturing defect. Your families were notified. A memorial was held for the crew. The crew, I repeated. Yes, Commander Oleg Petrov, Flight Engineer Sergei Lebedev, Mission Specialist Dr. Alexei Voronov. I stared through the forward viewport. Earth's limb cut the universe in two, a thin curve of blue and white. On my ascent, I said slowly, we reached orbit nominally, docked with Vityaz. Oleg and Sergei departed and returned to Earth. They should be on the ground. Static. Control. We have no telemetry record of any docking, she said. Vityaz was unmanned. The platform was not yet brought online. It was scheduled for a remote deorbit after the failure. But then we started receiving intermittent signals. Noise mostly. Data that didn't match any live mission. We flagged it as interference. That was 198 days ago. My blood ran cold. 198, I repeated. That matches my station time. You're saying you've been receiving my signals. Yes, ghost transmissions, we called them. The humor never reached her voice. Instrument readings that didn't match any payloads we had in orbit. Voice fragments. We analyzed them, assumed it was crosstalk from military satellites, mislabeling in the routing software. Until today. Until today, I echoed. Today the pattern locked, the signal cleared, we established a narrowband link, and you answered. The ring hummed louder. A thought, terrible and simple, slid into my mind like a knife. Control, I said slowly. The launch in your records, was the ascent profile identical to ours? I don't understand the question. Same launch vehicle, same date, same time. Yes. Same crew. Yes. Oleg, Sergei, me. In their world, we had died. In mine, I was here. I drifted to the window. My fingertips found the handhold by long habit. Earth filled half the view, moving steadily beneath us. Control, I said. What are you seeing beneath my orbit right now? Can you describe the ground track? Stand by, she said. Keys clicked faintly in the background, or maybe I imagined them. You should be over the Atlantic, heading toward the African coast. The Terminator line is. It's not, I said. Say again. It's not the Atlantic. Below me, a vast expanse of green spread where desert should have been. Great, dark river systems inked across a continent that didn't match any map I knew. Cloud patterns curled in unfamiliar spirals. The night side glittered with lights in places where there should have been deep jungle or empty ocean. Alexei, Sokolova's voice was careful, flat. What do you see? I don't know, I whispered. On day 200, the Earth changed. That's not exactly true, I know. The planet beneath me had always been itself. It was my map that shifted, my certainty, the way I fit what I saw into the world I believed I lived in. Now that map was broken. I spent the next hours in a blur of activity. I photographed everything, land masses, coastlines, cloud formations. I sent the images down to Sokolova's team. Their return packets came back tagged and highlighted. This should be the Sahara, she said in one transmission. These coordinates, these weather patterns, but the footprint is wrong. The albedo is wrong. It looks more like, she paused, like Central Europe. The stars you're seeing match our catalog, but the apparent magnitudes are off by a fraction of a percent. Alexei, it's as if the Earth you're over and the Earth we see from ground-based telescopes are not identical. I thought of the odd curves of night I'd seen weeks ago, the subtle shifts in starlight. Like I'm seeing a different version, I said. Something like that, she agreed quietly. Control, I said after a long silence. You said you started receiving ghost transmissions 198 days ago. Yes. What was the first one? She hesitated. Control. The first anomalous packet contained fragments of audio, she said finally. We almost didn't recognize it as language. The signal was stretched, distorted, overlaid with noise, but we managed to clean up a small portion. And it was you, she said, your voice speaking your own name. I closed my eyes. In my mind's eye, I saw the launch pad again, the frost on the metal, the symbols that crawled on the rocket's skin. Do you know which time this is? The dream voice had asked. Control, I said. I think your Alexei died, but I didn't, or I did, and this is what came after. I don't know how to put it into words. This station, this orbit, we're not over your Earth. We've been considering the possibility of a parallel solution space, she said carefully. A what? A state where the outcome of the launch bifurcated, she said. In one result, the vehicle failed. That's the reality we experience. In another, the mission succeeded. That might be the one you inhabit. For reasons we don't understand, the data between these two states is leaking. Leaking, I repeated. The universe is not supposed to do that, she added softly. The ring hummed, soft and insistent, like a finger tracing the edge of a glass. What does that make me? I asked. There was no answer. I didn't sleep that night. I floated by the window and watched the other Earth. Yes, that's what it was, I realized gradually. It wasn't a warped version of my own, not exactly. It was an Earth where a million tiny decisions had been made differently. Rivers choosing new paths, cities sprouting in different places, storms veering slightly off course. The constellations were the same, but the subtle scattering of background stars was shifted. A universe whose coin tosses had landed opposite to ours. In that universe, another Alexei had died in the sky. Maybe his last thought had been a curse. Maybe he'd reached for the abort handle, too slow. Maybe he'd seen the atmosphere flash through the window one last time. But something of that death had pushed through into the math of the gravimetric ring. A discontinuity, a spike, a pattern that shouldn't have been there. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. I thought about the first anomalous signal I'd heard, about how the ring seemed to breathe sometimes, as if it carried a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I thought about the complete power loss, the moment of absolute darkness, the universe taking a breath and deciding, for an instant, how to reconcile two contradictory truths, that I had died and that I was still here. Maybe it hadn't decided. Maybe it had kept both, and left me hanging between them. A man in orbit around two overlapping Earths, neither fully his. On day 200, I realized I was a glitch. The experiments continued. I sent my readings to Sokolova's team. They sent back questions, models, mathematical frameworks to test. They spoke of interference patterns between universes, decoherence lags, quantum entanglement at macroscopic scales. Words that felt like scaffolding thrown over an abyss, all straight lines and neat equations draped over something vast and incomprehensible. We agreed on a few things. 1. There had been an event during launch, some violent fluctuation not just in matter and energy, but in the underlying geometry of reality. The ring had been powered even then, its coils humming softly in standby mode. It had recorded a spike in the fabric of spacetime itself as the vehicle broke apart in their world and survived in mine. 2. That spike had left a resonance. The way a bell keeps vibrating long after you strike it. Only this bell was a boundary between two universes close enough to brush. 3. That resonance was anchored to me, to this station, to this orbit. "You're on the border," Sokolova said once, in an unguarded moment. A standing wave between two equally real outcomes. "Like a ghost," I said. "Or a bridge," she countered. The line crackled and hissed. "Is there a way back?" I asked the question we'd both been circling. "To my Earth, to the one I launched from." "We don't know," she admitted. "From our side, you are an echo of a man who died, a pattern in the noise that shouldn't exist, but you do exist. That's undeniable. The station's instruments are measuring real phenomena. Your biometrics are consistent and stable." "From my side," I said slowly, "your voice is coming from a world where I left behind a widow and a small grave marker." Her breath caught. "Yes." "If I deorbit," I said, "which Earth do I hit?" "We don't know." The ring hummed. Day 299. I woke to the alarm tone I had never heard before. It was low, insistent, a triple beep that cut through the background hum and sank its claws into my spine. I snapped awake, unzipped the sleep bag in a flail of arms and Velcro, and kicked off the wall, spinning toward the main console. Red lights crawled across the panels. A set of bars on the gravimetric monitor pegged at maximum and held, screaming out a continuous, high-amplitude reading. "Control, this is Vityaz," I said, shoving aside a floating notebook. "We have a critical anomaly in the primary payload, readings off-scale, requesting immediate analysis." Silence. I checked the comm link, signal nominal, antenna aligned. "Control, respond." The speaker hissed softly, like someone's breath in the dark. No words. The ring's hum had risen in pitch, climbing into a range I could almost but not quite hear, a pressure behind my eyes. I felt it in my teeth, a vibration that made every muscle twitch. Manual override, I muttered, working the switches with clumsy fingers. I shut down power to the ring, one segment at a time, expecting the hum to fade. It didn't. The monitors flickered. Numbers dissolved into nonsense, reformed as glyphs I didn't recognize, then snapped back to digits. For a heartbeat, the entire station seemed to lurch, like a ship cresting a wave. I grabbed a handhold and looked out the window. The Earth filled the viewport. It was wrong. Not in subtle ways now. Not in fractions of degrees or slightly shifted coastlines. It was as if someone had taken two different globes and slid them partially through each other. Continents overlapped like double-exposure photographs. One version of Africa, desert-brown and familiar, sat ghosting over a greener, fractured twin. City lights from one timeline flickered through the cloud cover of another. Storms drew spirals in both skies, their arms misaligned. I could see 2 nights, 2 days, 2 Terminator lines grinding slowly past each other, never quite meeting. I felt dizzy, as if my own body had been similarly doubled, 1 foot in each invisible world. My breath came shallow. "Control," I said softly, "are you there?" For a long moment there was nothing, then the speaker crackled. "Alexei." The voice was mine. I froze. "Alex," this time clearer, my own voice slightly off in intonation, speaking from a throat that wasn't mine. "If you can hear this, it means the window is open." My mouth went dry. "Who is this?" I whispered. "I don't have much time," the other Alexei said. "The ring is burning itself out. Every pulse brings you closer to us and pushes us closer to you. The more we overlap, the less stable that border becomes." His tone was urgent, stripped bare of the protections we all wrap around our words. "You died," I said stupidly. "Yes," he agreed. "In my world I never made it this far. The vehicle broke apart. I felt the heat on my face for a moment." He laughed, a short, brittle sound. "But something of me didn't quite let go. It caught on the ring's field like a hook, like static caught on wool, and then there was you." "You've been watching?" I asked. "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes I'm nowhere. Sometimes I'm spread thin between stars. Sometimes when the ring pushes hard enough, I'm almost here looking through your eyes. You felt me in the dreams." "The launch pad," I whispered. "Yes, that was me trying to ask the only question that matters." "Which time this is," I said. "Exactly." The earth below shimmered, its double layers sliding across each other with glacial slowness. "In one world," he said, "you lived. In another I died. But the launch, the station, the ring, they knitted those outcomes together. You're balanced on the seam." "I know that," I said. "Control knows that. We've been talking about it for weeks." "Your Control," he said. "Your Earth, they want you back, so do I." Something in his tone made my stomach clench. "Back where?" I asked. "To which Earth?" He didn't answer immediately. "Do you remember the mission parameters?" he said instead. 300 days alone, endurance test, psychological thresholds." "Yes." "And the contingency clause they briefed you on, about catastrophic failure during ascent?" "Yes," I said. "Mission scrubbed, station deorbited, no crewed missions for at least 3 years, public outcry, the usual." "In my world that happened," he said. "No second chances, no Vityaz, no gravimetric ring, just debris in the sky and a set of names etched into stone." My chest ached. I thought of my wife, standing at a memorial, holding a folded flag. I thought of my mother's hands shaking as she read the official condolence letter. "In yours," he continued, "they got everything they wanted. Data. Proof that a man can hang between worlds and not lose his mind. Proof that reality can be twisted if you find the right fulcrum." "No one wanted this," I said. "They didn't plan." "Didn't they?" he asked quietly. "They built a machine to listen to the universe's deepest vibrations. They strapped it to a rocket full of volatile fuel and hurled it into a gravity well. What did they think would happen if the numbers went a little sideways? His anger washed over me like heat. "What do you want?" I asked. "Choice," he said simply. "The one thing none of us got at launch." The speaker hissed. The hum of the ring climbed. "We don't have much time," he said. "The overlap is peaking. That's why you're seeing both Earths at once. That's why you can hear me. After this, the border will either settle or tear. We don't know which." I swallowed. "What are my options?" "Three," he said. "You can try to drop into your Earth. Fire the thrusters on a deorbit burn calculated for your station mass, your atmospheric model. Maybe the universe collapses the wave function in that direction and you become fully real there. You walk on your ground. You breathe your air. You live with the knowledge that somewhere a widow visits a grave with your name on it." "Option two?" I asked. "You cut the ring," he said. "Shut it down permanently. Smash the superconducting coils, vent the cryogen, break the machine that holds this border open. You drift in a decaying orbit over an Earth where you never existed, a ghost in hardware they never built. Eventually, your station burns up. Maybe your atoms rain down on fields where no one knows your name." My throat was tight. "And the third?" "You do nothing," he said. "You stay right where you are, you keep the ring humming. You live out your mission, every one of your 300 days on the seam, neither here nor there. Not fully alive in any world, not fully dead in mine. You become the guardian of that border, the standing wave between two truths." "That's not a life," I whispered. "Is it worse than the alternatives?" he asked. I thought of re-entry, the violence of atmosphere against hull, the black sky paling to blue. I thought of stepping onto concrete, smelling dirt, hearing birds. I thought of my wife's face when she saw me alive. I thought of a world where she had already learned to grieve me. Would I be a miracle or an intrusion? A glitch inserted into a narrative that had already begun to heal? I imagined the other option, cutting the ring, drifting until friction ate me. No control, no voices. The Earth below forever unfamiliar, its cities not mine, its history one I had never lived. A clean, lonely end. And the third option, staying. Day and night scrolling endlessly, two Earths sliding over each other like cards in a magician's hands. My only companions the hum of the ring and the occasional ghost of my own dead voice. Every day, a decision deferred. "It's not just about you," the other Alexei said, as if he'd heard my thoughts. Maybe he had. "This border, this overlap, it's not stable, it's feeding on energy. The more you run the ring, the more tightly our worlds are stitched. If you drop, if you choose one Earth, the seam may heal. If you cut the ring, it may snap shut. But if you stay, if you keep oscillating between states." "What?" I asked. "You might make it worse," he said. "You might turn a small tear into a wound. Let more realities bleed together. More dead men like me, more living men like you, all tangled." I squeezed the handhold until my knuckles whitened. "Why tell me this?" I asked. "Why not just beg me to bring you back, to find a way to put you in my place?" He laughed again, softer. "Because I've had 200 days to watch you," he said. "To feel your choices. You don't cut corners, you don't flinch. You carry weight. That's why they sent you up here. That's why the universe hooked me on you of all people." He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was almost tender. "I trust you to do the terrible math." The speaker crackled violently. I winced, pulling back. "The window's closing," he said, his words warped by interference. "When the count hits 300, the system will trigger the planned deorbit sequence automatically. That's built into your mission, remember. You were never meant to choose, just to endure. But the ring has changed that. It's given you space between seconds." A burst of static swallowed the next words. "Day is a choice, Alexei. Every orbit, every breath, between my death and your life, between their Earth and yours. Whatever you decide, decide it fully." The hum became a howl. "Wait," I shouted. "What did you choose?" There was a flicker. For a moment I saw myself in the reflection of the window, not as I was, but as I could have been. A face burned, eyes cloudy, hair singed away, a suit blackened by fire. "I didn't get to choose," he said. "I'm already on the other side." Then he was gone. Silence. The ring's hum dropped back into audibility, a low, bone-deep vibration. The monitors steadied. The double Earth began to slowly drift apart, their overlapping silhouettes pulling away like magnets losing contact. I floated there, heart hammering, mind racing. 3 options. I pushed off toward the central hatch, moving by muscle memory, hands gliding along foam-covered grips. I passed the tiny galley, the exercise equipment, the racks of experiments. The station suddenly felt like a coffin, a metal sarcophagus wrapped around a man who didn't know if he was alive or dead. At the far end, behind a secured panel, lay the heart of the ring, a torus of superconducting coils, their skin frosted with condensed air, lines snaking away to cryogenic pumps and power couplings. It looked fragile, almost delicate, for something that could hold a hole open in reality. Option 2 was simple. A wrench, a few careful blows, a valve open to space. The ring would warm, the superconductors quench, the magnetic fields collapse. Whatever resonance had been holding me between worlds would vanish. Option 1 required more calculation. I'd have to fire the station's thrusters precisely, adjust my orbit into a lower, intersecting path that would guarantee re-entry within a few passes. The onboard computer could do it. It had always known how. The sequence was already there, locked away until day 300. I could unlock it early. Would Earth catch me, and which Earth would it be? There was no answer to that in the data. No equation that would tell me which side of the wave function would win if I threw my mass into its center. Option 3 required nothing but inertia, drift, another day, another orbit, another postponement. Every day is a choice, the dead man's voice echoed in my skull. I wrapped my fingers around the ring's housing. Frost bloomed under my touch, shimmering in the light. "What do you think?" I asked it. "Do you want to die?" It hummed. It sounded absurdly like no. Day 299, 12:00 station time. I floated in front of the main console, the thruster controls glowing softly under my hands. Outside, the Earth, or both Earths, rolled beneath me, their overlapping clouds tracing slow spirals. I opened the mission parameter file. There it was, the deorbit sequence. Day 300:09:00, auto-initiate unless overridden by ground. Ground, in my world, might not even know what this world was anymore. Ground, in the other world, might never have written this file. "You were never meant to choose," the ghost had said. I disabled the automatic trigger. You can call that my first concrete decision. A tone chimed. A small line of text appeared on the screen. Auto DORBIT sequence, manual control transferred. For the first time since launch, the fate of the station was entirely in my hands. I could still choose option 1. Input the burn parameters, lock them in, and trust that re-entry would collapse the border in my favor. I could still choose option 2. Float back down the corridor, take the wrench, and smash the ring until it died. Instead, I did something no psychologist had included in their models. I did nothing. Not permanent, not yet. But for this orbit, for this 90-minute slice of existence, I chose not to decide. I watched the Earths. On one pass, I saw a storm system over what should have been the Atlantic, its eye perfectly round. On the next, there were 2 eyes, slightly offset, twin hurricanes sharing an ocean that didn't exist in either world alone. On another pass, night claimed both planets at once. City lights sprawled across continents, their patterns misaligned. For a heartbeat, I saw a line of brightness where there should have been empty sea, a chain of islands that belonged to neither map. My chest hurt. I realized I'd been clenching every muscle. I forced myself to breathe. Day 299, I said into the log recorder. Personal entry. I hesitated. Where do you begin when talking about the end of the world or the end of your place in it? The psychologists always said that isolation reveals you to yourself, I said slowly. Strips away distractions, performances, the little lies you tell yourself to get through a day. Up here, there's nowhere to hide from your own thoughts, no one to blame for the silence. I watched a sunrise, two sunrises, a thin line of fire racing along two overlapping horizons. They were right. I've had 300 days almost to listen to my own mind, to catalog the ways it frays under pressure, the fantasies it spins, the fears that wake me at 0300 station time. I've also had the universe itself whispering in my ear, telling me that the categories we cling to, alive, dead, here, there, are maybe not as solid as we'd like. I paused, swallowed. Today, I learned that my existence is a border dispute between two realities. That somewhere I am dead, somewhere else I am alive, that I am neither and both. I looked at my hands, turning them slowly in the air. They looked ordinary. Scar on the left knuckle from when I'd slipped fixing a valve on a Soyuz mock-up. Callus on the palm from years of manual labor before the academy. These hands launched from one Earth, I said, and now orbit another, or two others. I don't know where I belong. I don't know if belonging is even a meaningful word at this scale. I reached for the comm switch, thumb hesitating over it. To any control who can hear this, I said, to any Earth, I am Alexei Voronov. I am alive. I am also dead. I am both a survivor and a casualty of your mission. My throat closed for a moment. I forced the words out. You sent me here to endure, to last 300 days, to measure what a human mind can bear. I'm here to tell you that the mind can bear more than you want to admit, that it can hang between worlds like this and still find ways to love the curve of an unfamiliar coastline, the glint of alien city lights through cloud cover. I laughed, a quiet, shaky sound. Here's my data point for whatever it's worth. We can endure. The question isn't whether we can, it's whether we should. I ended the log. The ring hummed approval, or maybe that was my imagination. Night. In orbit, that word loses its usual meaning. Night is just the part of the track where Earth stands between you and the sun. It comes fast, a line of shadow racing across the planet, swallowing cities and oceans indiscriminately. On this pass, as darkness rose, I saw something new. Between the two overlapping Earths, where their edges didn't quite align, there was a thin sliver of nothing. Not blackness, not the comfortable velvet of space sprinkled with stars. This was an absence so complete it made my eyes water to look at it, a wedge of unlight that cut through clouds and land and sea. Where it passed, city lights winked out, storms froze mid-spiral, the atmosphere itself seemed to hesitate. The ring's hum climbed. My breath fogged the window. This is what happens, I whispered, when the border tears. Not a neat snap back to one reality or the other, not a gentle healing of the wound, a widening, a spreading crack of oblivion. I thought of option 3, of infinite deferral, of living forever on the seam, a coward's choice, a martyr's. Maybe the dead man had been kinder than he needed to be, calling it guardianship. Every orbit I spent here, humming and undecided, fed energy into that absence. Every day I refused to choose, the wound grew. Somewhere, uncountable kilometers below, people on both Earths were looking up at a sky that didn't quite match their charts. Maybe they saw stars flicker and vanish. Maybe their compasses spun. Maybe they felt a pressure in their bones, the way animals sense earthquakes before the first tremor. I thought of my wife, on one Earth with a ring on her finger and my empty side of the bed, on another with a flag folded in her hands. In both worlds, I said aloud, you deserve better than this. My hand drifted to the thruster controls. Option 1. To live in a world that still contained me, even if that world had already mourned. To step into a reality where I was both miracle and mistake. If the border collapsed in my favor, if the wave function chose that outcome, I would become real enough to touch. My atoms would belong somewhere again. And if it collapsed the other way? Well, I turned and pushed off toward the ring. Option 2. To cut the machine that had made this possible. To slam the door, even if it meant I was on the wrong side of it. To choose a clean, perhaps lonely, perhaps brief existence over an endless, corrosive suspension. I floated in front of the ring, the wrench velcroed to the bulkhead beside it. Frost crackled softly as I reached out, tracing the curve of the coils. They vibrated under my fingers. Every day is a choice, the dead man had said. Day 299, one orbit before the scheduled end. I curled my hand around the wrench. In the end, the decision wasn't mathematical. It wasn't about probabilities or ethics or which Earth deserved me more. It was smaller and more selfish and more human. I was tired. Tired of being a ghost. Tired of watching two worlds I could never fully belong to slide past beneath me. Tired of the hum under my skin, the constant ache of being stretched between contradictory truths. I wanted something solid, even if it hurt. I raised the wrench. For a heartbeat, the reflection in the polished metal wasn't mine. It was a burned face, eyes cloudy, hair gone. He nodded. I swung. Metal rang in the confined space, a dull, painful note. The coil housing dented. Frost shattered and swirled like snow. The hum spiked, then faltered. I swung again. The wrench slid from my grasp, spinning slowly in the air, but the damage was done. A crack spiderwebbed across the superconducting casing. Cryogenic coolant vented in a white plume, hissing as it boiled in the cabin's thin warmth. Alarms howled. I kicked off, grabbed the wrench, swung once more for good measure, then threw myself at the emergency valve. I twisted it open. A blast of bitter, freezing air rushed past me as the ring's inner chamber opened to vacuum. The plume of coolant thinned, whipping out through the vent. The hum dropped an octave, then another, then stuttered like a dying heart. Outside the window, the wedge of nothing flickered. The worlds shuddered. "Control," I gasped. "This is Vityaz. The ring is offline. I repeat, the ring is offline. We've vented the cryogen. Structure is compromised. Do you copy?" Static, then faintly. "Alexei, what have you done?" "Close the wound," I whispered. The hum faded entirely. In the sudden quiet, the ordinary noises of the station sounded strangely loud. The whisper of fans, the rattle of a loose panel, my own ragged breathing. I floated to the window. Below me, there was only one Earth. No overlapping coastlines, no double storms. The Terminator line was clean and sharp. City lights mapped exactly where my memory said they should be. I pressed my forehead to the glass. "Which one are you?" I asked. There was no way to tell. Somewhere, Control would be receiving my last transmissions, or they wouldn't. Somewhere, a flight director named Sokolova would be staring at graphs that had suddenly gone flat. Somewhere, a widow would look up at the sky, feeling something she couldn't name. I checked the deorbit sequence. The automatic trigger I'd disabled didn't rearm itself. The universe had given the choice back to me and kept it there. I could still burn, I could still drop. I looked at my hand on the thruster control. Every day is a choice. I thought of the dead man, of his last moment in a sky filled with fire. I thought of the ghost transmissions that had kept her world from forgetting me entirely. "Thank you," I said softly, to whichever version of myself was listening, "for trusting me to do the terrible math." I input the burn parameters. They were the same ones that had been scheduled for day 300, only shifted forward by a handful of hours. The computer accepted them with a soft chime. Deorbit sequence ready, it displayed, awaiting confirmation. My thumb hovered over the button. If I was over my own Earth, I would go home. If I was over theirs, I would fall like a meteor over cities that had never watched my launch. Either way, I would stop being a question mark written across the sky. "Control," I said, even though I didn't know who could hear me. "This is Vityaz, beginning deorbit burn." I pressed the button. The station shuddered as the thrusters fired, a deep, sustained push that pressed me gently against the harness I'd strapped on without remembering doing so. Outside, the thin smear of atmosphere brightened, molecules beginning to complain at our passage. The Earth swelled in the window. Clouds sharpened, their structures more detailed. I saw the outline of continents, the glitter of rivers. The sky darkened from absolute black to deep indigo. Somewhere below, someone might be looking up, seeing a new star flare briefly as a station began to fall. I hoped, absurdly, that in at least one world, my wife would be watching. As the hull began to glow, as the first fingers of plasma licked the edges of the window, the speaker crackled one last time. "Alexei." The voice was mine, both mine, all the versions of me that had ever stood on a launch pad and looked up. "You chose," it said. "Yes," I said. "Thank you," it whispered. The fire thickened, the station groaned, panels tore away, spinning out into the maelstrom, the window filled with light. For a moment between one heartbeat and the next, there was no fear, no regret, only a strange, vast relief. I was no longer between. I was falling. They will never know, down there, on whatever Earth this is, exactly what happened in the thin band of sky where I spent my 300 days. They will say the mission failed or succeeded. They will assign causes and lessons, write procedures and tributes. They will name streets after us, or they won't. Somewhere, a woman will feel a pressure in her chest as she watches a bright streak burn across the night. She will not know why she is crying. Somewhere else, another version of her will wake from a dream of a hand reaching across unimaginable distance, choosing to let go. Above them, for a brief time, the air will remember the shape of a man on the border between worlds. Then it will forget, the way all things are eventually forgotten. But for one orbit, for one day, day 299, I knew. Every day is a choice. And I chose to fall.